Welcome to the Southern Ground Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Parker McDonald, and this is episode number 86. And today on the show, we've got Josh Bell as our third local legend of this summer. And we're going to talk a lot about the state that he hunts, which is Arkansas, but we're also going to cover how he has shortened the learning curve for himself to hunting public land, something I think you guys will all find value in. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, and welcome to the Southern Ground Hunting Podcast. All right, with us right now, we have got this week's local legend. We've got Josh Bell from Arkansas with us. How's it going, man?
It's going good. Life is good. How are y'all?
We are
doing good, man.
Fantastic.
Hot, but I mean it's hot everywhere right now.
Yeah, it is warm. It is warm. Actually, Josh, if you're watching this video right now, guys, Josh looks like he is very heated right now to the point where he decided not to wear clothing to this interview.
He actually looks like he just got done with a pump there at the gym. Honestly, that's yeah. So
that's awesome. Listen, I'm just gonna throw this out there, no homo, that if I had that look and that physique, I would probably dress the same way. So
yeah,
no homo.
Yeah, the last time I looked like that, I think I was in third grade. So
it never looked like that.
So.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that, though, because
we are.
Because part of the stuff that you really do and the things that you're really pushing are fitness and things like that, and just things that I think are really, important for guys to be able to hear and maybe be able to learn something from you on that note. But, dude, so you are in Arkansas, and you're actually our second guest probably in the month of Arkansas. Yeah. It's a state that we have not covered much in the past, but we're covering it a little more often right now, kind of make it up. There. And it seems to me like Arkansas is one of those states that nobody really thinks about. I wouldn't necessarily call it a sleeper state, but it's not a state that people think, oh, man, that's a great place for public land. It's a great place for big bucks. But it seems to be the case. Is that pretty true there?
I think it is. I think a lot of people think about Arkansas, and the thing that comes to everybody's mind is ducks. Mm-hmm. It's hiding in the shadow of duck hunting.
Yeah.
That seems to be what I gather from a lot of people. I haven't hunted anywhere else, but you don't really see a lot of people talking about Arkansas deer hunting. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, you don't. And I've been very interested in it because I have family that lives in Arkansas, and so and also you're looking at a state that borders Tennessee, which is a great deer state. It borders Oklahoma, I think, which is a good deer state, and then it also borders Missouri, which is an awesome deer state. Yeah. So when you look at that, you really are like, I mean, Arkansas should be freaking awesome, and I think it is. I think it's a lot better than people give it credit for. But we got you on here not just for the fact that you are from Arkansas, as I'm jacked about that, but it's not every single day that somebody recommends. So I put out on a Facebook page called Arkansas Mobile Hunters, I think is the name of that page. I put a feeler out there. Hey, we're looking for somebody from Arkansas for the Local Legends series. Who do you got? And somebody tagged you in that post. I think maybe they sent me a message on there or something like that. But I remember looking at it and thinking, man, I don't know, this guy, typically with our Local Legends series, the guests seem to be a little bit older. Not normally, old guys, but, a little bit older. And at first glance, I'm like, this guy's not very old. But as I started looking at it, I started really digging into, mostly just creeping on Facebook and trying to find something that showed me like, hey, this guy is legit. And what I saw seemed pretty legit. And so I reached out and we got to talking. You started sending me some trail camera pictures, and I was like, yeah, we gotta get this guy on the show. And upon learning more, I figured out that you really haven't been even doing the public land game for a really long time, but you've already had a good amount of success with it, and you're consistently on big deer. And so that's why I thought this is a valuable episode in the Local Legends series. Yeah. Drew, I don't know, is that kind of how you're
I'm
putting
excited
this together?
for it just because of there's a lot of guys that are like Josh and I'm in the same boat that are trying to speed up the process of transitioning from maybe, private or lease ground to public, and how you can get there quicker. And so I'm really excited about this one.
For sure. So Josh, I guess starting out, man, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for a living, and how you got into this great sport.
Well, I'm currently a firefighter. I've been doing that for 4 years. Before that, I was a police officer. Did that for 4 years. And before that, I was an entrepreneur, a jack of all trades, master of none of them. But I did some hunting stuff right out of high school, took out a bunch of money, went in debt up to my eyeballs, had some businesses that did good, had some that failed. I ended up blogging for Outdoor Life magazine, had my own magazine, had, some different things that I was doing, but I had a passion for hunting. I always loved it and always felt like God put that in my life for a reason. And that's pretty much what I do right now. I've always worked out too. That's always been a big part of my life. I've always been a really competitive person. And even in my fitness and in hunting, I've always kind of thought outside the box and thought of ways to, like you're talking about, speed that learning curve and cut corners, but in a good way.
Right.
I've always kind of questioned what people say and try to find out for myself. In some ways that's good. Some ways that's not good. I'm very stubborn, but in hunting, it has paid off, and in fitness too. So that's pretty much me. I got 2 kids, got a stepdaughter, and I've got an 11-year-old stepdaughter, and I've got a 3-year-old of my own that is just got an attitude a mile long. And a great, loving wife that lets me go and hunt whenever I want to. So that helps.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. We're lucky to have those too.
Yes, we are.
I don't know about whenever I want. I don't know if that's in there all the time.
Much less go want to.
But I'm telling you, man, women that put up with deer hunters, they're champs.
They're a special breed, man. They're a special breed.
I don't know how. It's like God just put this little thing and she's going to be married to a deer hunter, so we're going to give her a little bit more patience.
Just a little bit.
I do think God definitely played a role in connecting dots, for sure.
Yes.
So I don't really know where else to start, just as far as your hunting style and, the things that I think are going to be really beneficial for other people to hear. But I guess the best place to start would be when you first start. I guess we could talk about before you really made the transition to hunting on public land. But what was your outlook on deer hunting beforehand? So you were in Arkansas, I'm assuming, and hunting private land. How did that look for you?
So my dad and grandfather and his father, they were all big farmers in the area. We had connections with some private land, and I got pretty lucky early on. I mean, I've always had a sense for getting on deer. I did very well whenever I was on lease land, and I didn't really do it was different then because you had certain places you could go. You couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. And I remember I got a crossbow. And I would always try to find, I would crawl in ditches in the wide open fields, and I actually shot a doe next to a culvert, up in a rock. I mean, I got stimmied in there and shot one. Oh, yeah, I did it my way. They put an end to that, though. They didn't like me, running around playing Indian with the deer. So I had to do, for us, it was sitting in a big box blind. With little windows or whatever, and just waiting, putting out corn and stuff. And I enjoyed that. I mean, it was fun, but that was all I knew of hunting, and that's kind of what you see on a lot of the outdoor media right now, right? It's just good properties and managing food plots, putting bait out, sitting and waiting and checking your trail cams. That was pretty much how I did it. And I always thought public land was less desirable land. That was for the peasants or something.
Let's talk about that real quick. Let's talk about that, because I had the same idea. What was it that made you think that? Was there something specific that you think, Like, this is why I felt that way.
I knew people that said they hunted over there, but never killed anything. One.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, the proof in the pudding. So, and two, it's also that the guys who were killing stuff weren't telling anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it was a big secret.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, you heard stories about it being unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you think it's like a war zone whenever you go out there, and people were just getting drunk and shooting everything that walked. It was like that scene in Bambi whenever the hunter comes in there, they're shooting rat. Everybody's crying and Bambi's mama dies, whatever. But that's kind of the image of it that I had, is like, there's all these irresponsible people out there, you know,
right.
like I might get shot by Lil Wayne out there. I don't know. But that was kind of the perception I had of it, and that it was overhunted. It was so overpressured. There weren't any deer there. Just pretty much it. And I also didn't know how much land was available to hunt until I got on. Well, actually, my friend was the one who introduced me to it. And I think up until then, I always wanted to go to like Illinois or something and go where the big deer were. And actually, I almost started my magazine back whenever I was a police officer. And my whole mindset was, all right, I'm going to start my magazine back. I'm going to, you know, get the money from that. And I'm going to travel and go to these leases and outfitters and have them put me on some deer. Because in my head, that's all it was. Like, if you had the money, you could kill big deer.
Right.
That's the only thing that separated people from killing big deer. And I was like, well, if that's the game I got to play, I got to get more money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So as a police officer, you're not going to make a lot of money. So I was trying to find some way to incorporate my passion into killing big deer
Right.
and making some money so I could fuel that thing. So my buddy actually, he's the one who introduced me to it. He's like, man, we ain't got to go to Illinois. He said, these guys that I'm working with, they're over here hunting this public ground. So let's just go take a look at it. So I took a look at it, and right off the bat, man, we found some big rubs and stuff, big tracks, and I was just blown away. I was like, man, there's some deer over here. And from there, I knew that I could, like, I didn't have to question it. I knew that it was so far back where we went, and we got lost that one time because we were looking at the big park maps and stuff and trying to find our way around. I didn't know how to read a topo or anything then. And I knew, I was like, you know what? I work out. I'm athletic. I have an extreme advantage over most of these other people. I know that these guys that I've asked if they ever kill anything or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I can go back further than them. Like, I've got a very big positive in my direction.
Right.
You know, I can go and get on some deer that other people may not be able to, or even mentally go there. Like, I'm not gonna go 2 miles back in the woods. I'm not gonna do that. But I thought this is an advantage for me.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since then, I have really just loved it. I mean, I love hunting public land.
Mm-hmm.
There's just nothing really better than it for me. I wouldn't want to go back to what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think you find a lot of guys that are like that. They kind of make it over that hump of the, you know, what you heard for your whole life, and almost like the things that you've heard are like at some point they become a driving factor for you trying to learn this. You're like, you know what? This is what I've heard. This is what I've learned. This is what's been etched into my brain for my whole life. That public land, there ain't no deer. It's a war zone. Whatever. All the things that you just said, and eventually you kind of come over this hump where you're almost like you get over that, and it's like a totally different story, and all of a sudden you're like all about this. And I can't honestly tell you where that was at for me, but I definitely hit it because I was the exact same way as you, man. And I think a lot of guys find themselves like that right now. My friends, people that I know that are like, man, I can't hunt that public land. There's
people everywhere.
There's people all over the place, and
Yeah.
and you're just like, if you can just get over that, then you might find something different. And it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just totally true.
to me, it's a rush because you have all this land that you can go and hunt, and you've got to eventually sit there and go, that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
X marks. That's what I'm betting on. That's what I'm assuming. I'm putting all my eggs in that spot that day. And whenever you kill something, it's just like, man, I could have been anywhere, but I chose to be right here. And I was right. Like that's, to me, that's it.
I was talking to my dad the other day, and he's got a little piece of property in East Texas, and he's getting into the whole saddle game, which is pretty cool. He's really getting excited about that and practicing that. And we were just kind of talking about his different setups, and his property's great. Like, it's a good piece of property. But he was talking about, man, you just really have it really good having all that public land, because you can really find areas for any situation, any scenario. And I'm like, that's exactly right. I feel at a disadvantage whenever I'm seeing, like, okay, this is where you're allowed to hunt, and it's just little tiny private pieces. That just ain't something that I'm terribly interested in. And so, not at this point. Like, once I hit that got over the mental hump, like, I kind of find myself right in where you're at. And you're talking about, going deep. Like, one of the biggest advantages that you have is that you're fit. You're able to go and do some of the things that other guys are not able to go and do. And that's something that's been pretty important for you and valuable for you in some of your tactics and things. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like, when you're looking at an area, are you always looking deep, or are there times when you're like, man, but I just think that spot's a good spot? Or, obviously for me, I'll give you this example. For me, there's a lot of good spots out there, but personally, I don't really care to go find a spot that I can't get to with my kayak, because that's just what I like to do. So some people like to just go deep. So how does that look for you?
I predominantly, if I'm looking at a new spot, I'm going deep, and from there it could vary. But I'm going to start off finding the most remote place that holds deer. I'm not going deep just to go deep.
Right.
I want to have a reason why I'm going there. There's a terrain feature. There's something that I'm capitalizing on besides it just being far back and hoping that nobody's there. And then what I've been doing, and this has worked for me pretty well, is that the seasons change. The deer are going to act different in October, November, December, January. And what I'll do is, if I'm going deep but I notice something good on the way in, I'll put a camera on it. I may hunt it. I may change it up as I go along. I found a lot of good spots going back to those areas. So I'm constantly looking when I'm going in, and I'm just monitoring different things. You can cover a lot more ground that way too. I mean, you're checking your cameras on the way in, and you can see what's going on, and you may not have to go all the way back there. But the one thing, you're talking about the physical aspect of all this stuff too. The funny thing is, I actually tore my quad the first real year I was hunting back there. And I remember walking all the way back, hunting, not seeing anything. And then whenever I checked my trail camera the next time, there were deer there. It just blew my mind. So, I go far back, and I try to make myself as ready physically as I possibly can. But I'm open to stuff early on. I've had places that we were talking before about scrapes that were really kicking off. They were deep back in the woods and stuff, and then all of a sudden they just kind of ninja vanished on me. There's just no deer, and I actually ended up going to a place that was really a lot closer than that, had a lot more pressure, and I was seeing a lot of deer, and I was seeing a lot of people. So, I kept hunting over there. I had people all over me, but I mean, it worked. You can also play pressure to your advantage in a lot of cases too. A lot of people don't think about it, but if there's a main gate or an access coming in, you can hunt that close to that, because there's, even if they're putting down a lot of boot rubber coming through that gate, they're all kind of going about a quarter mile off the road. And I don't know if the deer just get used to that ground scent, and it kind of just lowers their reaction to it, I guess. Their alertness. But I've had deer right close to the gates. I mean, like right off the road, and even put trail cameras up. And I have not video, but I have some pictures of guys walking in, and then big bucks showing up later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Specifically pictures of guys walking in with with thongs and and bras on.
Only when they want to mess with me, I guess.
It's a whole separate podcast, guys.
Yeah, we can talk about.
That's a whole separate one.
Hey, am I allowed to show this picture on this, or is there like?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we're gonna find this picture so everybody can know what I'm talking about, especially if you're watching the video version of this on YouTube.
I promise it's not my mad boyfriend.
Then we might get flagged on YouTube for nudity.
Censorship at its best.
So.
Oh gosh.
I'm sorry for that, y'all.
Yeah.
Looking into that role right now with scaring people about public land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our goal here was to get people to hunt public land.
Now they're done. So if you're just listening to the audio version, it's just a man.
Now, Josh, you were talking about scrapes because that's something we've talked about a lot.
You want to get off the
I
subject?
do. I want you to close that picture. I can't concentrate on actually having a good discussion with Josh when I got him over here. And so you were talking about scrapes, and that's something we've talked about a lot because I know here we in Alabama I think the general consensus, Parker, you can say yes or no to it, but we don't generally hunt over it just because of them. We don't see a whole lot of mature bucks there. So can you kind of
in the daytime?
In the daytime,
yeah.
They're there at night, obviously. Can you break down what your scrape hunting that tactic for you looks like? Do you make sure it's close to bedding or what?
The scrape activity, and I hunt like hill country,
mm-hmm.
and then I hunt ag land. The ag stuff, the scrapes that are closer to the bedding produce a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, on the hill stuff, the bedding could really be anywhere. It's
right.
like it's a big thing of woods, and a lot of it is real monotonous. It's really the same. So if you get a scrape in that area, most of the time the scrapes produce a lot more in the hill country than they do in the ag stuff. And I only say that because I think that the bedding is a lot easier to locate in the ag stuff than it is in the hill country.
Sure.
If you can find a scrape closer to the bedding, you're usually going to have a lot of, better success. And I think that if you have a trail of scrapes going somewhere, your best bet is just to figure out how they're accessing each one of those scrapes. So
right.
if you can have camera on each one or something, you can kind of understand where they're going. I don't know if that answers your question
mm-hmm.
very well, but for me, I have a harder time locating the bucks in ag land than I do the hill country.
Okay.
Because it's just, or I have a harder time hunting the scrapes in ag land than the hill country.
Okay.
And I think that's because, well, I say that, but I missed the buck off of a scrape, and I think they're more hit or miss in ag country than the hill country. And
do you think that has to do with the concentration? There's in that hill country type area, a lot of the time it's not, you don't have those concentrated areas, so mm-hmm. it's a little more spread apart. Right. Whereas in the ag land, it's a little more, you have concentrated areas within fields, and you got soybeans and corn. It's just
corn, more a ditch leading into a woodlot or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the hill country stuff. If you get a scrape, 90% of the time it's going to be active in the daytime and at night.
Mm-hmm.
In ag country, you may get a scrape that's nothing but nighttime activity.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, whenever it's closer to food, it's more nighttime activity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't know why that.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah,
I think because what I think is going on, I think those deer get kind of further back in the woods once season kicks in, and they're kind of held up in some bedding that's off of the food more or less. So if you can get closer to that area, you're going to pick him up on his trail early on before he gets up, starts milling around.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's different types of scrapes,
and
there are definitely those scrapes that are going to be a little bit closer to bedding. It's just so different, because I would have never said
mm-hmm.
Here where we're at, I don't think I would have ever said it anyway, at least not when it comes to mature bucks, that active scrapes are daytime and nighttime
mm-hmm.
active.
Yeah.
Just the majority of the time, I don't see a lot of bucks. I don't see a lot of even young bucks on scrapes out here. But I know those things vary from region to region. I mean, the guys from the hunting public came down to Alabama a couple years ago, and they were jacked up about hunting over a scrape. And a lot of the guys who hunt public from Alabama are like, why did they do that? They're not going to kill a deer there, you know. But but I know things are different in other places. Yeah. I was watching a John Eberhart video today where he was talking about his setup, and there was basically just scrapes on the edge of a field.
Yeah.
And I was like, that would never work here. But it works in other places, and so I think that's, you know, we cover we cover as much of the South as we possibly can, and so, you know, you got some states where that might be a tactic that really somebody could really benefit from, and then you've got other states where it might not be something that they really benefit from. But the focus here is that these are things that you have figured out quickly and put together pieces quickly to you know, like what you said, take a shortcut on the learning curve, not in a bad way. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's killer, man. Like being able to put those pieces together that quickly is just really, really impressive. I think it's really cool.
And also too, Josh, it just speaks to your wanting to learn. I mean, you had mentioned earlier that you had, you know, you bought some of the books and you bought all the Dan Infalt stuff, and Arkansas is a really diverse state in the sense of, just like you said, you hunt ag, and then in an hour you're on some hill stuff, and so it just speaks to that dedication of you saying, okay, I'm going to learn as much as I can about hill country bedding, and then also ag land bedding, or ag land, you know, hunting. I know here we don't have to necessarily deal with that as much because we don't have ag.
Not a lot. No, there's a few places if you go like northern Alabama where you can get into some ag, but I mean, for the most part, that's not really what we're paying attention to. Yeah. And I would love to. I would love to be able to have more, but we just don't have a whole lot. So
when I think Alabama, I think of like pine thickets.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I drive through, that's all I see is a bunch of pine trees.
Yeah.
You'll get it. You'll get pines.
It will not disappoint you. I promise you. You will get pine thickets.
Yeah, if pine thickets are your thing, you got plenty of them here. And that's like Alabama, you'll have like pine rows, like southern Alabama. You get a little bit of that here. It's a lot more where we're at, more northern Alabama. It's a little bit hillier. Like you've got some good inclines and some pretty rugged terrain where we're at here, and that's, I mean, I really pay close attention to the hill country bedding tactics that Dan Infalt talks about. I think that they work. I think it's different for different areas, and I think, you know, deer density plays a part. The presence of crops being anywhere close plays a big part, but pressure is going to play a huge part. And so I think, you know, all that stuff is great, but I want to know some more things, Josh, that you've done to help kind of shorten that learning curve for you.
Right. Okay. So talking about scrapes, I'll kind of tell you how I got into that. So I studied up on all the buck bedding, and I went out there and was busting my butt trying to find these beds and stuff, and I did find some. And I'd put cameras out, and I wouldn't have anything on them, and I was going out there in the summer. Eventually, I had talked to enough of these guys that hunted public, and they were like, man, you got to put a little bit of bait out, you know? And I was like, no, I ain't going to do that. Yeah. But I was sitting there thinking, like, really hard about it. I was like, man, I just ain't finding nothing. I'm finding nothing on my trail cameras. And I was really distraught, and I got on the Hunting Beast forum, and I was telling them, like, man, I'm looking and looking. And what it was in the hill country, you have all these crops next to it, and all the deer are out in the crops. And every time they cut the crops, all the freaking deer come back in the woods, big woods, a lot of deer. It's like a big migration. So you don't have a lot of stuff going on. I mean, that was something that I learned. That was a history lesson about that area. So I keep that in the back of my head whenever I'm running, you know, trail cameras this time of year. But also, they were like, hey, you need to put out some mock scrapes. Whenever I started putting mock scrapes out, I started getting deer. I started finding them. I was like, well, I can look for an area. I know what scrapes look like. I know what kind of areas they're in. They're in wide open areas. They're usually, there's some type of visual indicator for deer. They can see them. I'm familiar with that. I can make that connection. So I started putting scrapes out, and I started getting on deer, like really, quick.
Mm-hmm.
I hunted a few places and didn't really get on anything. And then once I started putting those scrapes out, and once I started hunting existing scrapes, I came back to an area that had a water hole one time, and it was just tore up. There was rubs and scrapes everywhere. And I was like, man, I'm about to kill a deer here. I got up in that tree, and I saw about a 150, 160 class whitetail cruising down a ridge, and I was recording with my phone. Like, oh my God. And then that was when I killed my first buck. But that was what you would really call a primary scrape area. I mean, it had 3 scrapes all within about a 20-yard circle, and lots of rubs. And that spot was hot that year. And then after that, a lot of people got in there after that and kind of ruined the spot. But then about 2 weeks later, I killed another deer hunting over a scrape. And I mean, it literally shot him. I had a scent wick up on a branch that was kind of close to the scrape, and he was perfect broadside, nailed him. So for me, the scrapes, especially up in that hill country, like I said, it was an easy way for me to locate the deer that I wanted to hunt, and also know what kind of deer were in the area. Mm-hmm. So it didn't make sense for me to go around looking for buck bedding whenever the deer were chasing does, and there was a lot of activity. And like I said, a lot of these deer, they move a long way. But if you can find a hub where they're coming to, that's also good too. I mean, I know that a buck bed, you're finding the center of that hub where he's going to get up and move, but that bedding kind of changes too. So you can pattern those deer with the scrapes. There's a lot of different things you can do with them. And for me, I've just gravitated towards that a little bit more naturally than I have the buck bedding stuff. I still make a note of the buck bedding. Mm-hmm. So for hill country, I'll get on Google Earth. I'll do the history. And what I found is that most of the bigger bucks, they're in the select cut areas. And you can go back and see where they've select cut that area. Mm-hmm. And it's real thick. And I have a theory that those deer like to bed on the edge of that thick stuff more so than in it, because it's like super thick. Mm-hmm. And they like to look out over that open stuff. So whenever I go into an area, I'm looking at where that buck is going to be positioned at in the bed. I'm just assuming that that's where he's at, and I try to stay away from there and slip into some of my hunting spots. So that's kind of how I hunt that hill area. I look for the bedding. I look for somewhere I can get far back, and then I look for a way to access it. And like I said, when I go in, I'm looking for different stuff along the way that I might be missing. I put a camera on it, and I let the camera tell me what's going on.
That's something that I have. Everything you just said is kind of a lot of what I've been doing, mm-hmm. and I think a lot of guys who are, following along and a part of the hunting beast that are hunting in a lot of areas in the South are kind of catering it to our area. Yeah. And a lot of the scouting and finding the specific buck beds, and the for sure 100% there's a buck that's bedded right there. I'm not doing that all the time. I'm similar to what you're doing. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming a lot of things. Now, maybe I waste time doing that. I don't feel like I do, but it seems to be that once you figure out those consistent things, that make up a good bedding area or a good bed place for a buck to bed. Once you start figuring out those consistent things, then you can start assuming. Yeah. And he may not be there that day, but maybe there's another one. Or
well, we've also heard from enough people that the the Dan Infalt buck bed style doesn't necessarily work here, but we take principles from that, and just like Josh, just like you're doing, like you're finding his hub, which is his bed, but then you're also finding another hub where he's coming to, and that's what we find a lot here is that we're not doing the buck bed like right over him, he stands up, I shoot him right there. But more or less, we catch him coming out of it, going to a destination spot, mm-hmm. and then we're shooting him there.
Right, and that's one thing too. There's I may not hunt that scrape directly,
Yeah.
but there may be a pinch point. There may be a ditch crossing, and I try to put cameras on that, not just because I'm going to hunt it, but I want to see what's actually taking place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm ADD, I'm dyslexic, I'm not the smartest tool in the shed, but those cameras don't lie to me.
Right.
And I know what the deer are doing. I want to know if my assumptions are correct, so I can go back whenever I'm scouting and looking at an area. I can go, well, I remember from this thing, you know, that this is probably what's going on because I've had a similar experience running a camera somewhere else.
Yeah.
I come from the standpoint of if I'm going to guess about it, I'm going to put a camera on it.
Mm-hmm.
Right or wrong, I want to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Just because that's, to me, that tells me what's going on in my area. You know, like you were talking about with Dan Infall, that might be totally different.
Yeah.
And I found out this year the deer over here on ag land are totally different than the deer on hill country.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know exactly what's going on. I want to have data. I want to know if they move in certain weather conditions or not. You know, you hear a lot of debates about the moon and all this and that. So I'm running my own studies. I want to do my own research so I can get on the deer here in my area.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that's a good point, because I know, like, I've been guilty of it in the past, going, oh, but it's the right moon. They're going to move. And then you go sit out there and you're just like, yeah, nothing moved. And, you know, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. But I like that you're doing your own studies in your own area and just taking and pulling principles from other guys and applying it to your area. I like that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, you know, something I think a lot of guys can probably do better at is actually collecting data, you know, that, because I mean, you're already going to be seeing the data unfold, you know, if you're running trail cameras, if you're scouting, if you're seeing deer on the side of the road while you're driving, you're sitting in a tree, you know. I mean, you've got all the things. All you got to do is write those things down. We talked to Michael Perry last year, or maybe it was the first time that we interviewed him on the podcast. Either way, we talked to him, and the guy, he puts everything in a journal, and that's what he's doing. I mean, he's saying,
does that too.
Warren Womack does that. But Michael, I mean, he's going in and he's saying, okay, it was this moon on this day, blah, 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 blah. I saw this buck. And he's using all that to get more of a mental understanding of what the deer in his area are doing. And so I think what you're doing, Josh, is really cool because, I mean, you want to talk about things that are shortening that curve. For a guy, I mean, that's a big deal. Is paying attention to the stats.
Josh, do you go back and cross-reference weather with your trail cams? Okay. Could you give the listeners, like, I know for like us or me, I use Weather Underground. So can you just let some guys that are watching and listening know kind of how that process works for you? Because that's a small detail, but it seriously speeds up this learning curve going on the public.
I use Dark Sky.
Okay.
And it's got a really history feature on it.
Okay.
You have to pay for it, but heck, you pay for all kinds of stuff anyway.
What's money?
What's money?
Yeah, really. It's for hunting.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
And money.
Again, we say the women who marry deer hunters are a very special breed of woman that God gifted in their own.
Yeah, Josh is writing magazines, though, to cover all this cost. We're not, so we got to work on some stuff.
You're definitely going to spend some money.
Yeah.
Like, if there's something you like, you can tell what it is because that's what you spend your money on.
That's true. So
you don't even want to know how much money I spent on crap this week. I've been at the beach. I've been at the beach on vacation, and I've still spent a crap ton of money. Oh. Anyway, all right. So talking more about your cross-referencing weather.
Dark Sky is the app. Okay.
What I use, I like it for some reason better than I did use Weather Underground for a while, but for some reason I really don't remember why I switched to Dark Sky. I think it's because the app was just set up a little bit better for me. It was easier to go back if I was in the field, I could go back and dig up, you know, whatever day it was on the trail camera that I was trying to see what the deer was doing.
Okay.
So when I go and check a trail camera, I got a trail pad that I can check video. Like, I run a lot of video, for one, because people don't rip your SD cards that way out in the field.
Right.
If there's usually, you can't hook it up to your phone and read the video.
Right.
That's part of the reason it's kind of a deterrent. And this guy's blinding me with his dang reflection.
That's okay. There's a
there's a lawnmower going by right now.
Going by us right now, and I'm like, what in the world is that sound?
So yeah, I'll go back and I'll reference things while I'm out there looking at that trail camera. So if I got a big buck or something that was there a few days ago or something, I'll pull it up on dark sky and I'll try to find it that way.
That's a good tip, man. That's a good tip.
Yeah, I actually just looked up dark sky on my phone. I mean, so anybody watching, here's the app, $3.99.
Yeah.
That's going to be the cheapest thing you probably buy for deer hunting.
Yeah.
For your whole life.
And then also, Josh, you mentioned the Google Earth history. I thought that was a good tip too. That's something I haven't done in a long time, is going back and looking at those clear cuts. I like that too. Yeah.
The thing about Google Earth, you can also get on there and download KMI files. I think it's KMI files. There's some kind of file that you can download. You can search like topo maps. You can download those files and put them on there, and it kind of give you a general idea of what's going on. I know that OnX is it's good. I mean, it's a good starting point, but mainly I use OnX just to mark what I'm seeing out in the field. I take the pictures of scrapes and I'll put it in the OnX app. But most of the research that I do for hunting is through Google Earth. I like to go back and see when it's been logged, where the trails are. You can even go really far back and see different ditches. So it's kind of like if you can see a high elevation and a ditch, then you know that you might have like a pinch point right there. And you can even set scrapes up and stuff along those lines to kind of force that movement. So sometimes I'll do things like that, try to find crossings and stuff. And one thing too that I'll look for, as far as like the flat ground, and even in the hill country, I like to find areas that hold water late in the season, but not in the summer.
Okay.
Wherever you find that, you're going to find some type of new vegetation and growth. I'm not any type of freaking plant scientist or anything like that, but I know that there's different growth.
Would it be botanist?
I don't even know.
Is that the right word?
I'm not even going to try it, man.
I was going to say that, but I knew if I said botanist, it would mean something entirely different. Like a anal inspector. So I didn't want to throw any big words out there because I didn't want to sound stupid. Yeah, I don't know what all grows in there. I don't know, but everywhere there's water, late in the season, you can see the dates. If it's December and there's a little flooded area, and then you go back in September or something, and you can see like a different shade of green around there.
Yeah,
there's usually some good plant growth in there that those deer are snacking on, maybe bedding up in. But everywhere that those areas are, there's usually deer.
Yeah,
like every time I have found a spot like that, it is tore up. It's.
That sounds like it's.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that sounds like it's similar to, what a clear cut does, or what burning in the spring or burning in the winter does. Like it brings back that new growth that is very beneficial for the wildlife. I mean, and they're all gonna flood to it. It's basically. I mean, you hear clear cuts talked about as like big, thick, safe food plots.
Yeah. They
can just hang out in the middle of it all day, bed down, stand up, and eat. Like that's pretty much what they are. And so I think that's really interesting. And Josh, what it sounds like is really the things that you can, I guess, attribute to what we're talking about, shortening this curve, is going the extra mile, both physically and in this work that you're doing while you're sitting at home or whatever, when you've got a few minutes OnX is kind of standard at this point. A lot of people are marking things on OnX, and you look at OnX, but the extra mile would be, okay, I'm going to go onto something like Google Earth, I'm gonna look at historic maps.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna find the things that I'm looking for right there, and really not just going by what your Onyx is telling you it looks like right then or whenever that aerial photo was taken, but going and looking at the past.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome. I mean, that to me it just seems like that's kind of your.
Well, that's actually something we've seen in all the local legends. It's something that every good deer hunter that kills the quality of buck that you do, Josh. And I mean, Parker was showing me some pictures, man, and there's some hammers. I mean, they're great bucks. But everyone that we've talked to, that's been a theme. It's, hey, I'm going the extra mile. I'm doing the little things. I'm very most of the guys are detail oriented, in the sense of they are doing their own studies. They're putting their own cams out. Anything else that you got that maybe could help a guy out shortening the curve?
I will say that you got to be a little bit witty out there. You're not just hunting deer.
Mm-hmm.
You're hunting people too.
Okay.
So always be aware of the pressure that you're going to encounter. You know, for me, I'd go really far back, and I try to find areas that were landlocked. But in the process of doing that, I've found out that there's another problem,
mm-hmm.
and that's people that have that land next to it.
Yeah.
That ride four-wheelers, that put bait out, that have box blinds and stuff back there. So you've got to be able to protect your trail cameras and stuff like that. And I've found a few ways to do that. And what I'll do is I'll get a little Wi-Fi antenna, and I'll get some steel putty, and I'll glue that on my trail cameras. And that's just one way that I keep people deterred and away from it. I also get laptop locks, put that on the back of my trail camera, and I'll mm-hmm. carry a key and lock them up. But that cell antenna is a big deal, because the light bulb for me didn't go off until I had this ridge that was, I think I had to walk 3 or 4 miles to get back to this ridge, and I had like 5 cameras on it. And I just knew it was going to be a good spot. It was, you know, you couldn't get to it easily by water or anything. I mean, you had to make the walk, and you had to go over the ridges and stuff. And that's one other thing too. Just because it's far away doesn't mean it's hard to get to. If you're looking at a spot and it's like, God, I don't want to do this, that's a good sign, because everybody else is feeling that too.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll go all the way back there, and I check these cameras. And before I get to the cameras, I run into a guy, and he's in a ghillie suit and done rode a 4-wheeler back there and everything. And he's like, man, how the hell did you get back here? I was like, I walked. What do you mean you walked? I said, I walked from the main road. He was like, damn, you're hardcore. I was like, well, yeah, I am. Thank you.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah. He already killed a deer that morning and showed me the deer and everything. He said, man, we got some guy that's kind of, you know, he is what he is, but he was complaining about trail cameras being on his road over here. Long story short, they took all my SD cards. And the only one, he asked me, he said, do you have a cell cam over here? He said, I saw one that had some orange on it. What I did is I had an orange zip tie on it because it wasn't taking video. And I made a note on the back of the zip tie that it wasn't running video. So when I got out in the field, I wouldn't set it on video and forget. So it had a little orange thing on it. He thought it was a 5-point camera because it had that orange on it. And that was the only one that didn't get stolen. And it just made the light bulb go off. I was like, these guys are scared they're going to get their picture taken. So I go through now, and the ones that aren't even cell cams, I'll put antennas on them just to deter that very thing from happening.
I've never heard that, man. That's creative right there, man.
That is creative.
Through a thief. I don't like that crap.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's, you know, everybody does their own thing out in the woods, and that's fine. But man, I can't stand somebody stealing my stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, that's good.
Same.
I hate that.
That's actually a pretty good point. Like, I'm just gonna put some little bunny ears on here.
Makes them think twice, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not, they can shoot it if they want to, but they did it.
That's pretty awesome. So let's talk a little bit about this, and we don't have to spend a ton of time. We're running close to time, but let's talk a little bit about your fitness stuff. And is there like a certain thing that you're doing? Let me ask you this first. Was hunting a thing for you that inspired you to get into better shape, or was that always something that you've done?
It's always something that I've done. I've been doing that just as long as I have hunting. It's not something that I don't know if I'm very consistent with it. I do it all the time. It's kind of like a release for me. But whenever I started hunting, I started going from a standpoint of, okay, this is it. Like, I may not know as much as Dan Infalt. I may not have all the knowledge. I don't have the experience, but I'm in better shape and I can get back there further. If anybody should be back there hunting those deer that are off by themselves, it's me. Mm-hmm. So mentally and physically, I'm going to have that mindset that I'm not going to let anything stop me from where I want to go. Mm-hmm. If there's a ridge I want to get to, I can get there. And I'm constantly pushing myself to do that. And I know that sounds kind of weird because it's not like we're elk hunting or something like that. But like I told you, I tore my quad. And for me, that was kind of the wake-up call that, I may be able to squat, 400 pounds or whatever, but it doesn't really help me whenever I slip in a mud hole with a big climber on my back, 80 pounds on my back, and all that weight shifts on my leg, and it finds the weakest link in my leg. So I tore my quad doing that, and I was like, man, I've got to do a little bit different stuff. I got to incorporate some different things. So it wasn't necessarily that my whole training changed. I probably did a little bit more cardio and stuff, but I did incorporate some things differently because after that, I didn't stop hunting, but the next day I went further than I did that day. I tore my leg and I ended up falling 3 or 4 times, just flat on my face. I mean, it was horrible, but mentally I needed to do that because I wasn't going to stop. I mean, it was like October.
I like your words there. I needed to do that.
I needed to do that.
I had to. Yeah. I mean, it hurt and I was hobbling, but I couldn't. I knew I could do it.
Yeah. And
I just had to prove it to myself.
Yeah.
And that was actually the day that I went back and didn't see anything. And then the next day there were bugs there. But I needed to know that I could keep going, and that I wasn't going to let a physical thing stop me. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's a mental thing. It helps me process, going through the pain and the torture of everything. I mean, I try to train out in the heat. I try to get used to it, so it's not a shock to me whenever I get out there, because I don't want to be discouraged whenever I'm looking at that map and I'm like, man, I really want to get back here, but I really don't feel like getting back here. So that for me is what I'm always trying to do, because you might have a spot that's a little bit better than this one and you really think you might need to go there, but you might take the easy road. Yeah. And I'm guilty of that too, but I want to make sure that when that time comes, it's not because I'm being lazy, it's because it's a strategic, data-driven decision that I'm going there and want to hunt that.
That's so good. It's grit is what you're talking about. It's just having grit. And, all a guy can do, like for me right here, all I can do is kind of relate this back to my own personal experiences, and I think other people are doing that as well. Things that you have grit in. The first time, Drew, you went on a kayak hunt, your thought with me was,
don't drown.
Yeah, it was kind of hard, right? Oh. Like it was kind of like you do that and you're like, the first time you're like, oh my God, I don't think I can do that again tomorrow. It's just a lot. There's a lot of things to it. Mm-hmm. And that's not saying Drew sucks or anything like that. It's just part of it.
My God, Josh, he about drowned me. So we won't talk about that though. But what it is like, I do it every single time. Right. The same way that Josh, the way that you're going in there and you're working out in the heat and you're doing those things, and like when you do those things, it almost
doesn't get harder. It gets a lot easier. You just kind of it
Right.
becomes the norm. Waking up to go to work
It's a new normal.
every day
Yeah.
isn't fun for anybody. But
Right.
eventually, you just get used to it. It
Right.
becomes normal, and you adjust. And so I
Right.
think guys can do that with anything, whether it's their access, the route that they take to get to a spot. It can be very tempting to go through a spot because it would be faster to get
Right.
there. But if that's not the best route, to
Right.
go, you could be
Yeah.
just wasting your time
Well,
when
and-
you could have just made
Yeah.
a valuable and smart decision of going around
Right.
that area.
And not just even in access. I mean, dragging a deer out of the woods is about the worst workout of all time. I mean, going up ridges, down ridges.
Yeah.
We've all been like, we've shot them before, got to the top of the ridge and just let them roll down it because you're like, I ain't doing that.
Yeah.
And so, but even packing a deer out, if you walk 2 miles in, I would at least want to pack it out. But I know some guys drag, but it's just having that mental fortitude to say, okay, I'm going to set my mind to something and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I don't worry about dragging them out at all, because if I shoot a deer, I'm like, that's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
I'll all night dragging it out one leg at a time if I have to.
Yeah. It's kill the deer first.
Kill the deer first.
Figure out how
That's
you're
right.
going to get it out later.
That's right.
I
But
think
you're right. Talking about that access, that's a big thing. I mean, if you keep walking, the same trail every time going in there, it's not going to be the same hunt. I mean, it may be the same hunt if you're not seeing anything, but if you can go around and take the hard route, usually you can capitalize on that.
Yeah.
That little mental, like we were talking about, that little switch where you're like, man, I'm doing what's best. I'm not doing what's best for my laziness
Yeah.
or what's easiest,
Yeah.
but I'm doing best to kill a deer today.
Yeah.
And that to me is one of those little things that people are like, it's just you walk in there and you shoot one. It's not, I mean,
I wish it was that
they
easy.
work for some people and that happens on some, sometimes that happens. But for me, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Every time you're hunting, you're not spending time with your family. So I really want to make sure that every hunt I go on, I'm doing the best I can and I'm in the best spot I think I should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's good, man. That's so good.
Solid.
Like,
Solid.
I think anybody listening to this right now can, if nothing else, gain that little bit. Especially people who are new, who maybe, Josh, if you're anything like me, there were things that I learned that were so easy and they were just common knowledge to a lot of guys that eventually, when I learned it, I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I never know this? And those little access things like that can make or break a hunt every single time. If you're not used to public land, if you're used to hunting on private land, private is a little bit different because a lot of times you're walking, you've got 4-wheeler trails cut that go straight to the shooting house, and you just kind of get trained in that. You just take the path of least resistance, but even that is not always the best option, and so I think you start to learn these things, you start to put it together. I think that's really cool. So, well, man, Josh, dude, we really do appreciate you coming on the show and talking about this. I really think this episode is obviously very different from the majority of our local legends series, but I think it's very beneficial for a lot of people who are trying to do exactly what you are doing successfully, and that is just like shortening this learning curve.
It's something we've never actually talked about.
No, we really haven't.
Yeah.
We really haven't. There's guys out there who have done a very good job of it.
Yes.
Andy May is a guy that I was just sitting here thinking about it. I don't know if you know who Andy May is, Josh, but he's a stone cold killer. He hasn't been hunting his whole life, and he goes and he shortened that curve just by being very, very aggressive.
Yeah.
And I think that's similar to what you're doing, Josh. And so, man, tell us where everybody can find out more about you. I know you've started a YouTube channel recently. Tell us where we can learn more.
I'm working on a website right now. It's ihuntpublic.com. If you go there, it's going to have a bunch of Elsa videos and stuff. But what I'm trying to do with that is create a network of public hunting content. And I've been working on it for 4 months and finally realized that I'm not a coder. So I'm coming out with a very basic version of what I wanted. So I'm going to have that up before too long. And then you can go on YouTube and find I Hunt Public, all one word, or find me on Facebook with Josh Bell. So,
well, cool.
Sweet, man.
Well, dude, again, we really, really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I mean, you know, that's one of the things is I've really don't have as much success as a lot of these other guys have. I've blown it a lot, and I'm learning from that. But I really appreciate you guys, you know, doing an interview with me, considering I don't have a lot of deer that I'm holding up. You know, like I just this year's gonna be different. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've killed some deer, but not like some of these other guys have. So to be included with them, I really do appreciate y'all including me and wanting my perspectives on things.
Yeah, man.
And I hope that if there's anybody out there that needs some pointers about just getting started and some of that stuff, then they can reach out to me, and I'll be glad to talk deer hunting, probably more so than my wife would want me to.
That's awesome, man. Well, you have a good one.
All right. You guys too.